You are clearly a top-tier genius with the 3S-level talent blaze body, yet you decisively abandon the fire warrior profession with a 200% contract compatibility, and instead choose to swap for the school bell's healer profession, which has no attacking capability. This is only because, in my previous life, the childhood friend and school belle, Su Yaoyao, tricked me into giving her my fire warrior profession, exchanging it for her harmless healer profession. And then I ended up dying with the white-eyed demon lord in a dungeon. Afterward, I unexpectedly returned to the day I obtained my professional badge. I had thought that in this life, I would absolutely not become that miserable healer again. But I discovered that my 3S-level talent blaze body had been initialized, and the new talent I received was Healing Dominator. At that moment, countless alpacas stampeded through my mind. Immediately afterward, I checked my new talent's characteristics. Healing bonus: when I heal an ally, there's a chance to gain a permanent attribute point bonus. Talent replication: there's also an extremely low chance to acquire the target's talent. Karmic drop: there's a chance to obtain special items when healing takes effect. Soul refinement: souls can be used to refine equipment characteristics. After reading these 4 characteristics, I exclaimed how wonderful. Internally, any one of them alone could rival an SSS-level talent. Then I started to think, besides Su Yaoyao being a healer, who else would be willing to trade their professional badge with me? My gaze slightly narrowed, and I suddenly remembered someone. After class, I quickly made my way to Class 2. Seeing me appear at the entrance of Class 2, many people in the class knew I was there to find Su Yaoyao. Under the envious gazes of everyone, Su Yaoyao slowly stood up, her arms crossed, looking up at me. I walked into the classroom, ignored Su Yaoyao, and went straight to another girl, Li Fei. Come out with me for a moment. Witnessing this scene, everyone was stunned, especially Su Yaoyao, who looked completely incredulous. I directly pulled Li Fei and walked out, saying, "Let's go, accompany me to a place." Li Fei was completely bewildered, having no idea what was happening, only foolishly following my steps. "Stop!" Su Yaoyao was almost fuming with anger, not expecting me to leave holding the hand of the girl she disliked the most. Upon hearing this, I stopped. Seeing my reaction, Su Yaoyao couldn't help but let out a cold snort, thinking, if he doesn't apologize to me in front of the whole class, I won't easily forgive him. However, the next moment, I whispered something into Li Fei's ear, and then Li Fei blushingly nodded, and the two of them left the classroom. Seeing this, Su Yaoyao was utterly dumbfounded. On the rooftop, Li Fei lowered her head, looking a bit flustered. She truly couldn't understand what I intended to do. "I want the healer's badge in your hand," I said, looking at Li Fei. Li Fei looked up in astonishment, somewhat doubting her ears. You would?" Looking at Li Fei, I asked again. Li Fei was a little flustered. Truthfully, she was willing to exchange because her talent was S-class thick body, belonging to the warrior type. My flame warrior's compatibility with her exceeded 150, while her healer compatibility was only 95. "Then what about you?" Li Fei said, a little embarrassed. "I'll be the healer. If you need me, I can be that man sitting behind you, constantly working hard," I said, smiling at Li Fei. Li Fei's cheeks flushed slightly, but then she shook her head. "No, your profession badge is too precious. You're worried that after I swap, your profession won't have 200 compatibility, right? But I'm telling you, actually, my talent has higher compatibility with a healer. Otherwise, why do you think I'd want to swap with you?" I explained. Li Fei frowned. She knew my talent was mediocre, but she didn't know exactly what it was. Seeing Li Fei's somewhat goofy expression, I knew I had succeeded. "Then you weren't lying to me?" Li Fei asked. "You're a puppy if you don't believe me, let's pinky swear." After some back and forth, we finally exchanged our respective badges. The quest to become a flame warrior was to simply enter and clear any fire elemental secret realm. "Tomorrow, we'll go to the flame forest together, and I'll help you change professions." I accepted Li Fei's profession badge and said. Li Fei nodded like a chick pecking rice. "Oh right, remember what I told you about us exchanging badges? You absolutely cannot tell anyone." I solemnly instructed. "It's just that everyone in school now knows I got a profession badge with 200 compatibility. If people find out I swapped the healer profession with Li Fei, the school principal would probably be the first one to come talk to me, and even the city's education department might send people to investigate. I don't want to make things so troublesome, so this matter needs to be kept secret for now. As long as the profession change is successful and the deed is done, it won't matter even if it gets exposed then. Hearing this, Li Fei nodded with a grave expression, also understanding the importance of the matter. Afterward, I shamelessly took Li Fei's hand again, and the two of us said goodbye at the classroom door. Li Fei returned to her seat with an air of composure, as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, Su Yaya was practically grinding her teeth, getting angrier the more she thought about it, and made up her mind, after school, she would go directly to my place and swap out my profession badge. That evening after dinner, I went directly to the local Holy Light Church. Each profession badge has its own exclusive quest. Only by completing the quest can the profession be truly bound. For a healer, this profession only requires entering the Holy Light Church and bathing in holy light to bind it directly. Are you a healer coming to receive the Holy Light bath? Just go stand by the holy steel up front. A young priest said, looking at me. I thanked him and, following the young pastor's directions, walked towards the sacred stone monument inside the church. I just needed to wait there for a short while to bind my profession. A good child. Just then, an old man in a cyan robe quietly appeared beside the young pastor, smiling as he looked at me. Seeing this, the young pastor quickly bowed and said, "Bishop." Then, the young pastor glanced at the stone monument again, nodding. He is indeed quite polite. Meanwhile, I had already easily completed my profession binding. When I saw the last prompt, I was utterly astonished. One healing spell was equivalent to 5 people with 100% cooperation, and any healing spell cast using my innate talent only consumed 1 mana point. My choice to become a healer was truly destined. Just then, 3 people rushed into the church. "Pastor, please save my brother," the man at the front shouted excitedly as soon as he entered. I turned to look and saw that the intruders were covered in blood and wounds, and one of them was already unconscious, clearly on the verge of death. Seeing this, the young pastor immediately went to them. "Save my brother first," the tall, thin leader said urgently, then instructed his brothers to lay the unconscious injured man on the ground. The young pastor began to cast healing spells, while the other 2 waited anxiously nearby. "Do you need healing?" I asked. The leader turned his head to look at me, then nodded, thanked me, and didn't pay any more attention to me. I, meanwhile, began to cast healing spells with familiar ease. Your healing spell restored 500 health points to Lu Yong, and you gained 1 spirit point. A surge of joy filled me. I hadn't expected the first healing spell to trigger my talent's characteristic. Having tasted the sweetness, I couldn't help but cast even more diligently. Not far away, the old man in the cyan robe, seeing this scene, widened his eyes in surprise. I had just awakened, yet my speed in casting healing spells was even faster than his. After more than a dozen healing spells, I directly gained 5 spirit points, and Lu Yong's health was already full, no longer allowing me to trigger the healing master characteristic. I immediately turned to another person and began healing them. Under my flurry of healing spells, I gained another 7 strength points and an additional 10 spirit souls. Based on the points gained, I realized that Healing Master randomly increased attributes, evidently depending on the target's profession. By this time, the young pastor had already dealt with the severely injured man's wounds. "I cannot fix physical disfigurements," he said with a slight touch of regret. "Your wounds are healed." The young pastor turned, surprised to find that the remaining people had all recovered. "This young brother helped us," Lu Yong said gratefully, looking at me. I just smiled faintly, and the young pastor looked at me with some surprise. He hadn't expected a newly transferred young healer to possess such capability. "Young friend, may I ask your name?" Just then, the old man in green robes approached, smiling as he spoke to me. I recognized the old man's identity at a glance. In my previous life, I had received considerable care from him as well. "Cardinal Huilu, my name is Lin Yi," I replied respectfully. "Very good. I saw your performance just now. You are simply the most talented healer I have ever seen," Lu Qingshan said, not sparing his praise. "Your Eminence, you flatter me." "I merely did what I could," I responded with a smile. Lu Qingshan, however, took out an item. "It's rare to find a genius like you." Here is a skill book for retribution. Take it. Seeing this scene, I was somewhat speechless how similar it was to my previous life. In my past life, Lu Qingshan also chased after me to give me skill books. He even helped me transfer to the Blaze Fury priest profession. I later learned that it was because my proficiency in healing spells had impressed Lu Qingshan. So, I then pretended to shake my head. This is too precious, you can't take it with you when you die. Rather than keeping it to be buried with me, it's better to leave it for you young people to use. Then I shall respectfully accept, Lu Qingshan said with great magnanimity. Thank you, Bishop Lu. I stopped feigning modesty and respectfully took the retribution skill book from Lu Qingshan's hand. After bidding farewell to Lu Qingshan, I left the church but didn't rush home. Instead, I found a small inn to stay for the night. Just then, my phone rang. I picked it up and saw it was a text message from Su Yaoyao. She was at the park entrance and asked me to bring my professional emblem to meet her. I replied with "there's something dirty" and then immediately blocked her. The next day, I arrived at the professional plaza. I was still a bit early for my appointment with Li Fei. I thought I could first purchase some basic equipment and supplies. I currently had 100,000 yuan, which was the pension I received after my parents died in a spatial rift riot 3 years ago. As a healer, my equipment needs weren't high, but a spatial bag for storage and potions for mana recovery were definitely necessary. Afterward, I found a vendor selling spatial bags and bought a basic spatial bag for 500 yuan. The words "refinable" appeared on the spatial bag. I then found a corner and spent 1 spirit shard to attempt a refinement. With a ding, the spatial bag in my hand glowed slightly. I immediately checked the refine attributes, and upon seeing the trait that appeared, my eyes widened in surprise. If I bought a bunch of 1 cubic meter spatial bags and put them all into this multidimensional spatial bag, I could stack up hundreds of cubic meters of space at my disposal. Because many professionals, due to storage space limitations, painstakingly clear dungeons and acquire secret skills, but in the end, can only bring out a small portion of the spoils. But now with this, I can carry more spoils than others. Then I returned to the previous stall and bought 20 of them in one go, before heading to other places to procure more items. Watching the remaining balance of over 50,000, I couldn't help but feel a pang of heartache. In the silence, I heard someone calling. I turned my head and saw Li Fei, with 3 other people following behind her, including Su Yaoyao. I couldn't help but narrow my eyes. Uninvited nuisances. Li Fei looked at me apologetically. I'm sorry, she's been following me. I smiled and rubbed Li Fei's head, saying, it's fine, we'll just ignore her. Seeing Li Fei and me so intimate, Su Yaoyao was filled with rage. After a moment of hesitation, she said, Shenmo, I know all my past mistakes, but I've come to my senses now. I'm willing to give you a chance to be your girlfriend, but you have to promise me that you'll only be good to me from now on. Yaoyao is really generous. If it were me, I wouldn't forgive so easily. Yeah, pulling and tugging with other girls on the street, what a scumbag. Su Yaoyao's 2 female companions provided timely assists. Li Fei, despite her good temper, was a bit angry at this point. Why was he pulling and tugging with Chen Mo here? But then I heard him pull me and say, come on, let's not get too entangled with these lingering spirits. We have more important things to do. Li Fei looked up at me, then nodded heavily, okay, I'll listen to you. I smiled slightly, and the 2 of us held hands and left, leaving Su Yaoyao and her 2 companions looking at each other. Afterward, Li Fei handed me a staff that was entirely white and shone with a metallic luster. This is for you. I looked at Li Fei, a little surprised. He said, I need ample healing, otherwise I wouldn't dare go to the front line to tank for you. Li Fei said with a hint of petulance. I took the staff and saw that it would cost at least 100,000 on the current market. It seemed Li Fei had borrowed money from his uncle's family. Moreover, I discovered that staffs could also be enhanced in quality through refining. Then I looked at Li Fei again and asked, what about yours? Li Fei didn't hide anything and directly showed me all of his equipment, a very simple set of beginner warrior white gear, which would probably cost only 4 or 5,000. Is this okay? Li Fei looked at me, her cheeks flushed. That's good, we just need to assemble 3 more people, and then we can enter the dungeon. I said, looking at Li Fei. Although bringing Li Fei is enough, with more people in the team, I can seize the opportunity to level up my breakthrough talent, I thought to myself. You're in charge of recruiting. Say it's an S-tier talent, rare class leading the team, excluding any class outside of healers. I instructed. Li Fei followed suit, posting recruitment information on the city's professional channel. Meanwhile, I used the excuse of going to the bathroom to sneak off and refine my equipment. After 3 refinements, the staff in my hand directly advanced 1 level. Looking at the staff's properties, I was satisfied. Just then, Li Fei messaged me saying that enough people had been recruited and we could set off. I then tossed the staff into my spatial bag and headed to meet them. After a brief introduction, I also learned about their professions. The tall, thin teenager, Hook, was a warrior, and the twin girls were archers. I glanced at the ancestral banner and then directly activated the life gate, choosing the Flameseeker Forest, normal difficulty. In a blink, the 5 of them were teleported into a special space. I took out my staff and said, Hook, lead the way. Diane, Dana, you 2 deal damage. I'll heal. Looking at your HP, you're a healer, then he's a flame warrior. Hook's eyes widened as he looked at me. Hearing this, Diane and Dana were also a bit dumbfounded. Facing Hook's question, I smiled slightly, not entirely correct. He's not a flame warrior yet, but I am indeed a healer. Hook and the twin sisters couldn't hold back their expressions. At this moment, they all understood they had been tricked into helping Li Fei with her class binding quest. Since we're already here, I'll be the tank. Hook reluctantly stepped forward. I hope my healing isn't too terrible. Then Hook removed his weapon, preparing to start the battle. Just then, a beam of light landed on him, Soul Link. He was surprised and took another look at the effect of this status, then he was completely thunderstruck. It actually forced him to share the damage he received with all other members of the team. At this, almost everyone looked at me. Is this really okay? Hook was truly torn between laughter and tears. Under the effect of Soul Link, damage was evenly distributed among everyone. While it seemed to reduce the tank's pressure, the healer's pressure doubled. Diane, worried that I couldn't handle everyone alone, said uneasily, how about we cancel this status? Don't worry, we can try fighting 1 monster first. If you're still not comfortable, you can always leave. I didn't plan on explaining anything. After all, with my current setup, healing this small team was simply child's play. The 2 young sisters discussed it for a bit and ultimately decided to trust me and take a risk. Everything was in order. Hook let out a low growl and charged towards a level 1 goblin. After being attacked, the goblin immediately turned and counterattacked Hook. The 2 simpletons traded blows, making quite a lively fight. Diane and Dana, the 2 sisters, raised their short bows and began to support Hook. With the combined damage of the 3, Hook landed a critical hit of 30 damage with 1 punch, killing the goblin and ending the battle. But now it seems that the damage, which would have accumulated on Hook and required only 1 healing spell, is now distributed among so many people, requiring several more healing spells out of nowhere. Hook was just about to suggest canceling the Soul Link, but before he could say it, the next moment, I slammed my staff onto the ground, and a sacred light illuminated everyone present, fully restoring their health. Hook swallowed the words he was about to say, while Diane and Dinah were completely charmed by my move. Brother Chen, I shouldn't have doubted you just now. I apologize. Hook immediately bowed and apologized. Diane also quickly said, our sisters know we were wrong too, Brother Chen, please don't give up on us, we promise to be absolutely obedient. Dinah nodded frantically, repeatedly promising to be obedient. As for Li Fei, there was no need for words, he had been firmly on my side from the very beginning. Since we've decided to stay, let's continue. During that last wave of healing, I also gained attribute bonuses from each of them. Now I can't even imagine how many attributes I'll accumulate throughout the entire dungeon. Next, I suggest we speed up. If possible, I hope we can compete for this year's speedrun leaderboard. Hook and the others, who had been excited, immediately looked at me as if they had seen a ghost upon hearing my words. Judging from the previous combat, fighting small monsters isn't much of a problem, but how do we deal with bosses? Then I held my staff and casually cast a skill. A goblin not far ahead let out a shriek and was instantly struck dead by a holy light. Punishment, is this enough? I maintained my calm and collected demeanor. Hook directly knelt before me. This is absolutely amazing. For me, Hook, to meet you today is truly a blessing accumulated over 8 lifetimes. The entire team was completely obedient to me. Afterward, everyone geared up and headed towards the storm. I was expressionless. Half an hour had already passed since entering the flaming forest. Along the way, I gained a full 30 points of strength and 25 points of agility. Although it wasn't triggered every time, as long as I kept casting healing spells, there was still a chance to gain attribute points. However, this probability is clearly not fixed. For the same target, the healing spell could initially be said to trigger 100% of the time, but after it had been triggered many times on that target, the probability gradually decreased, eventually stabilizing at a relatively low level, approximately once every 10 triggers. But if the probability is low, then we compensate with frequency. So, under my encouragement, using the weekly ranking as an incentive, Hook and the others charged forward like they were on steroids, completely disregarding their lives. The only thing that made me a bit depressed was that the probability of copying talents was simply too low. After a full half hour, I had cast at least 100 healing spells, yet I hadn't copied a single talent. It seems that copying Kaishukuan's talent at the church last night was truly a burst of good luck. But it doesn't matter as long as there's a chance for healing, I can always copy others' talents. Let's take a break. After killing a goblin squad, I finally told Hook and the others to rest. Hearing that they could rest, Hook collapsed onto the ground, gasping for air. He was tired, thirsty, and even a little hungry. But there was no alternative once inside a secret realm, you just had to endure it. Because the more space you saved, the more loot you could carry out, and that was all good money. Why are you lying on the ground? Come over and eat. Just then, I heard myself call out to Hook. He looked up and was dumbfounded. I had produced a small table and several folding stools from who knows where. Li Fei, meanwhile, was spreading a tablecloth on the small table and arranging various small cakes, drinks, and even stamina replenishing potions on it. Are we camping? Hook's mouth twitched slightly. As for Dian and Dinah, the sisters also looked at Li Fei and me with a bit of daze. Clearly, this was my doing, as they could clearly see that the spatial bag full of food in Li Fei's hand was something I had given him. Everyone come and rest, replenish your energy. We'll set off in 10 minutes. I casually sat on a folding stool and delightfully ate a small cake. Eating a small cake in a secret realm was unimaginable in my previous life. After all, storage space was limited, and even when bringing food and drink, one would choose high-energy density compressed biscuits or similar items. Small cakes were out of the question. I even went as far as bringing a table and stools, which was ridiculous. Seeing that I had started eating, the others couldn't help but sit down and join in. Hook and the twin sisters tacitly refrained from asking why I could produce these things. Just looking at my staff, they knew it was definitely not ordinary. Moreover, with high-quality skills like Group Heal, Soul Link, and Discipline, selling such advanced skills for over 100,000 outside would be incredibly easy. It was also normal to have a high-level spatial bag. I couldn't possibly use a 500 credit basic spatial bag like them, could I? After eating and drinking their fill, Hook contentedly rubbed his belly. I never thought exploring a secret realm could be so comfortable. Oh my goodness, our progress is so fast. Dinah checked the time and couldn't help but exclaim. Historically, the fastest time to clear the flaming forest was 1 hour and 25 minutes. According to their current progress, they might reach the boss in about an hour, a full 20 minutes faster than the historical record. And this was even after spending 10 minutes eating and drinking. Of course, it would be impossible to achieve such speed relying on Hook and the others. Along the way, many elite monsters were defeated by me using the retribution spell. If it were solely up to Diana and Dinah, the two archers, there'd be no way to move this fast. Just those elite monsters alone might take 10 minutes each to wear down. Are we really moving this fast? Hook seemed somewhat disbelieving. In the previous battles, his attention was solely on the monsters, completely losing track of time, only to realize they now had a chance to break a historical record. I was also slightly surprised. I originally thought we'd just contend for this year's Rookie King, but I didn't expect to break a historical record. But what about it? My strength doesn't allow for modesty. What's the point of having strength if you don't show it? Having eaten their fill, the five set off again. This time, both Hook and the twin sisters were even more motivated, as they hadn't imagined they'd have the opportunity to leave their names on the historical record list. And quite possibly in first place. Even though it's just a beginner dungeon like the Flame Forest, and on normal difficulty, and even though anyone can tell at a glance that they are definitely just big boss hangers-on, what about it? If they're so capable, they should find a big boss like me to help them break a historical record. Under such encouragement, they naturally worked even harder, understanding that even if you're latching onto someone, you need to do it properly. The number of elite-level small monsters also increased. In this environment, my frequency of taking action also became more frequent. Both healing and retribution are skills that don't require casting time, so theoretically, they can both be cast with a mere flick of the wrist. However, this demands extremely high casting skill, and those like me who can seamlessly switch between the two skills are a rare minority. My casting speed is so fast that sometimes Hook and the others even mistakenly believe I'm casting both healing and retribution simultaneously. This ability excites Hook and his companions. If they could achieve this level of skill, even with average talent, they could carve out a path for themselves among the professionals. It's just too difficult. Unfortunately, masters like me are truly 1 in 10,000. Another beam of holy light descended, and a level 3 goblin warrior fell directly. We reached the boss in only 58 minutes. Dinah had been keeping track of time, her expression incredibly excited now. Most of the main damage along this path was done by me. If it were them, it probably wouldn't have been this fast. I'm going to cancel the effect of Soul Chain. You all watch your positioning and don't get hit by the boss. I also checked the time before giving the instruction. The rest of them nodded in agreement. Boss damage is quite high, so sharing damage should be used cautiously in boss encounters. Otherwise, one skill could wipe out the entire team if even one person fails to dodge. I led them into the small grove, where the previously dim forest was now lit up by burning torches everywhere, casting a red glow over the entire area. In the clearing in the middle of the woods stood a goblin shaman. It wasn't just staring at us. The goblin shaman had 10,000 HP and skills: Staff Strike, Fireball, and Small Meteor. Small Meteor dealt significant damage. A single hit would practically instantly deplete the HP of any squishy character, sending them into a near-death state. A professional's HP is actually more like a numerical value used to absorb damage. As long as the HP isn't depleted, the professional's body itself won't take damage. So, even if hit by what looks like an exaggerated attack, as long as there's HP, they won't truly be injured. However, once HP is depleted, the professional falls into a near-death state. In this state, any attack will directly affect the professional's physical body. For example, Liu Yang's group, whom I encountered at the church last night, were clearly injured from having their HP depleted in the secret realm. But as a beginner boss, the goblin shaman's skills are quite easy to dodge. Basically, anyone who isn't disabled can avoid them. Although it's an official residence boss, it's easier to deal with than an elite monster with several minions. It just takes a bit more time. Foolish intruders, accept the baptism of fire. As the smartest goblin in the village, he could even speak human language instead of just squawking. Hook, wait for me to get close to the boss, then charge. Archers, watch your positioning. I checked the time, then gave the command. The rest of them nodded in agreement. Boss damage is quite high, so sharing damage should be used cautiously in boss encounters. Otherwise, one skill could wipe out the entire team if even one person fails to dodge. I led them into the small grove, where the previously dim forest was now lit up by burning torches everywhere, casting a red glow over the entire area. In the clearing in the middle of the woods stood a goblin shaman. It wasn't just staring at us. The goblin shaman had 10,000 HP and skills: Staff Strike, Fireball, and Small Meteor. Small Meteor dealt significant damage. A single hit would practically instantly deplete the HP of any squishy character, sending them into a near-death state. A professional's HP is actually more like a numerical value used to absorb damage. As long as the HP isn't depleted, the professional's body itself won't take damage. So, even if hit by what looks like an exaggerated attack, as long as there's HP, they won't truly be injured. However, once HP is depleted, the professional falls into a near-death state. In this state, any attack will directly affect the professional's physical body. For example, Liu Yang's group, whom I encountered at the church last night, were clearly injured from having their HP depleted in the secret realm. But as a beginner boss, the goblin shaman's skills are quite easy to dodge. Basically, anyone who isn't disabled can avoid them. Although it's an official residence boss, it's easier to deal with than an elite monster with several minions. It just takes a bit more time. Foolish intruders, accept the baptism of fire. As the smartest goblin in the village, he could even speak human language instead of just squawking. Hook, wait for me to get close to the boss, then charge. Archers, watch your positioning. I checked the time, then gave the command. The rest of them nodded in agreement. Boss damage is quite high, so sharing damage should be used cautiously in boss encounters. Otherwise, one skill could wipe out the entire team if even one person fails to dodge. I led them into the small grove, where the previously dim forest was now lit up by burning torches everywhere, casting a red glow over. It wasn't just staring at us. The goblin shaman had 10,000 HP in skills, staff strike, fireball, and small meteor. Small meteor dealt significant damage. A single hit would practically instantly deplete the HP of any squishy character, sending them into a near-death state. A professional's HP is actually more like a numerical value used to absorb damage. As long as the HP isn't depleted, the professional's body itself won't take damage. So, even if hit by what looks like an exaggerated attack, as long as there's HP, they won't truly be injured. However, once their HP is depleted, the professional will fall into a dying state. In this state, any attack will directly affect the professional's body. For example, Liu Yang's group, whom I encountered at the church last night, were clearly injured because their HP was accidentally depleted in the secret realm. However, as a beginner boss, the goblin shaman's skills are easy to dodge. Basically, anyone who isn't disabled can avoid them. Although it's a mansion boss, it's easier to deal with than an elite monster with a few minions. It just takes more time. Foolish intruders, accept the baptism of fire. As the smartest goblin in the village, he could even speak human language, not just croak. Hook, wait for me to get close to the boss, then charge immediately. Archers, pay attention to your positioning. I checked the time, then gave the command. The others all nodded in agreement. The boss's damage is quite high, so sharing damage should be used cautiously in a boss fight. Otherwise, with one skill, if even one person fails to dodge, it could mean total annihilation. I led them into the small grove. Inside the previously dim forest, burning torches were stuck everywhere, illuminating the entire forest in a fiery red. In the clearing in the middle of the woods, there was a goblin shaman. It wasn't just watching us. The goblin shaman had 10,000 HP. Skills, club strike, fireball, minor meteor. Minor meteor deals relatively high damage. A single hit is enough to instantly deplete the HP of several squishy characters, sending them into a dying state. A professional's HP is actually more like a numerical value used to offset damage. As long as their HP hasn't been depleted, the professional's body itself won't be harmed. So, even if hit by what seems like an exaggerated attack, as long as they have HP, they won't truly be injured. However, once their HP is depleted, the professional will fall into a dying state. In this state, any attack will directly affect the professional's body. For example, Liu Yang's group, whom I encountered at the church last night, were clearly injured because their HP was accidentally depleted in the secret realm. However, as a beginner boss, the goblin shaman's skills are easy to dodge. Basically, anyone who isn't disabled can avoid them. Although it's a mansion boss, it's easier to deal with than an elite monster with a few minions. It just takes more time. Foolish intruders, accept the baptism of fire. As the smartest goblin in the village, he could even speak human language, not just croak. Hook, wait for me to get close to the boss, then charge immediately. Archers, pay attention to your positioning, I commanded. The others nodded in agreement. I charged towards the goblin shaman first, with Hook following closely behind. The sight of a therapist charging at the boss was certainly odd, but it happened nonetheless. Hook and the others couldn't worry about anything else. They immediately began to act according to my commands. Charge is a basic warrior skill, allowing them to rush to a target within a certain distance at 10 times their normal speed, briefly stunning the target and generating a large amount of threat. Just as Hook initiated his charge, I had already turned aside to make way, and Hook directly took the lead. The goblin priest fell into a brief stun due to the charge effect. Meanwhile, my footwork was like a phantom's as I swiftly moved behind him, striking the goblin priest on the back of his head with my staff. Red numbers shot up from the goblin priest's head, and everyone's eyes widened. "Hook, you guys take care of yourselves, the rest is on me," I growled, charging directly at the goblin priest. The goblin priest entered a frenzy, taking 100% increased damage, and his casting speed increased by 300%. Seeing this prompt, Hook and the others were stunned. No wonder I had repeatedly warned them to pay attention to their positioning. It turned out I wanted to pull off this trick. There's a secret to speedrunning Flame Forest, triggering the goblin priest's frenzy state to forcibly increase the damage he takes, achieving a quick kill. However, in return, the goblin priest's casting speed also significantly increases, which demands much better positioning from the team members. It was a double-edged sword. Diane and Dana were extremely tense at this point. Qua qua qua. The goblin priest let out a frantic roar, and several magic circles lit up on the ground around him, a warning that meteorites were about to fall. Everyone immediately scrambled to dodge. There was no room for DPS. With the original 3-second warning, anyone who wasn't crippled could dodge in time, and even greedy players could shoot an arrow before moving. But now, with only a 1-second warning, failing to dodge immediately would surely result in a hit. While others were frantically dodging meteorites, I had already begun casting my penance. The holy light struck the goblin priest, directly dealing over 2,000 damage. Penance, 200 base damage, which became 1,000 damage with my 5 spell power. Since the goblin priest was in a frenzy and taking double damage, the 1,000 damage penance applied to him resulted in the damage value directly soaring to 2,000. I'll speed kill the goblin priest in 5 seconds. I appeared completely at ease on the field, able to cast spells effortlessly while moving, 1 penance per second, directly depleting the goblin priest's health bar. Congratulations on clearing Flame Forest. Total time spent, 59 minutes, 56 seconds. Congratulations on setting a new historical record. You have received an extra reward. The clear message popped up directly. Hook and the others saw these 2 prompts and immediately collapsed to the ground, panting heavily. It was truly extreme, like being chased by death itself. They had managed to clear it just within 1 hour. I was somewhat surprised, as my original intention was simply to finish the battle quickly. In fact, even without activating the goblin priest's berserk state, it would have been relatively easy to kill it. But if the battle can end faster, why drag it out? As for the safety of Hook and the others, it's not that I don't care, but rather that during the battle just now, I observed everything very carefully. This level of danger, Hook and his team still have the ability to avoid it. And as professionals who live on the edge, don't always expect to live a peaceful life. If you can't dodge a meteor attack with a whole 1 second of warning, you might as well stay home and sleep. Zen City Professional Square. It was getting increasingly lively at this time, almost overcrowded due to the influx of a large number of novices. And just then, everyone saw a clear pass message. The team spent 59 minutes and 56 seconds to clear the Flame Forest, achieving an SSS rating and breaking the historical clear record. The originally bustling square fell into silence instantly. But after realizing what had happened, everyone let out an incredible gasp of amazement. That only took an hour? Holy crap, that's intense. Where did this silence come from? 20 whole minutes faster than the previous historical record, that's too exaggerated. Everyone in the professional square was shocked by this news. They never expected that a 4th-tier settlement like Single City could produce a god-tier player of this caliber. And soon, someone spread my information. S-rank talent, plus the rare profession Flame Warrior with 200% synergy, no wonder he achieved such a result. The gap between people is sometimes even bigger than the gap between people and dogs. So it was him, his team was recruiting teammates just now. I regret it, I wish I had gone too. People on the square constantly sighed, this is the gap. Su Yaoyao was also in the square at this time, her expression somewhat disheartened. Historical record, she muttered. At this point, she had accepted the reality, I had switched to a mage profession. To be honest, with an A-rank talent and a profession with 100% compatibility, he could already be considered a winner in life. But without comparison, there is no harm. I had already soared, directly breaking the historical record of the Flame Forest, while he had nothing. Wait, who said I was a rare profession flame warrior? I'm clearly a healer. Among his teammates, there was indeed a flame warrior named Li Fei. What the hell is going on? Silence is my classmate, I definitely wouldn't be mistaken. He was filled with intense resentment at this moment. If I had kept the flame warrior for myself, I might not be so angry. But instead, Li Fei got the benefit. So what was I pursuing him for all these years? Just to make him this miserable now? Silence, you idiot, you really deserve to die. That bitch Li Fei will definitely leave you. Su Yaoyao's heart was completely consumed by resentment, I must make them pay. I'm going to report them for privately trading professional badges. It must be that bitch Li Fei who gave him some benefits to get the Flame Warrior badge. On the other side, I had already entered the phase of splitting the spoils. After completing the dungeon, profession holders have 10 minutes to pick up or distribute loot. When the team was formed at the beginning, the rules for loot distribution had already been set. Generally, it was distributed in order, for example, the drop from the first monster belonged to me, the second to Hook, and so on. As for items of green quality and above, they all belonged to me. Li Fei, because he was just tagging along to complete the mission, voluntarily opted out of the item distribution order. It was at this point that everyone realized that almost all the loot along the way had fallen into my hands. Although at first we picked up loot in order, Hook and the others only had 1 cubic meter space bags, which couldn't hold much. So, by the mid to late stage, most of the loot was taken by me. After all, Hook and the others couldn't take it, so it was considered forfeited. Rather than leaving it, it was better for someone with space to take it. And I couldn't very well refuse. The Goblin Priest dropped a total of 5 items, mostly miscellaneous things that could be ignored, aside from 2 green items. After collecting everything, I looked at everyone and said, let's go for the settlement. Inside the dungeon, rewards for killing monsters and completing achievements are given to profession holders after the settlement. Compared to the drops within the dungeon, the rewards for breaking historical records were clearly more exciting. Hook and the others were already eager to see what kind of rewards they would receive. As the captain, as soon as Lin Yi chose to settle, all team members would directly enter the settlement screen. Immediately after, a score panel appeared before the eyes of all team members. The rating for this dungeon clear was SSS rank. Experience points were calculated based on the total number of monsters killed within the dungeon, as well as individual output, healing, damage taken, and other factors. Therefore, you can certainly slack off and loaf around inside the dungeon, but in return, the experience points you receive during settlement will be much less than others. And those who contributed more would naturally gain more experience points. I've leveled up to 2. Hook exclaimed excitedly. Me too. And an extra 15% experience. I've also leveled up to 2. The twin sisters were also shouting excitedly at this moment. Killing monsters within a dungeon does not immediately grant experience points, they are only settled after the dungeon is cleared. So, for most newbies, it's quite normal not to gain any experience in the first few days, let alone level up. After all, clearing a dungeon is still too difficult for these novices who have just changed professions and can't even cast skills properly. Without a certain period of adjustment, it's very difficult to transition from a student identity to a professional one. I've leveled up to 3, Lin Yi said. In this secret realm, his healing output was undoubtedly number 1, and his damage output was the same. As for damage taken, due to the existence of the soul chain, everyone actually took the same amount of damage, so this part of the experience was evenly distributed. As the person with the greatest contribution, Lin Yi naturally received the most experience points. So, his direct ascent to level 3 at this point was not at all surprising. Lin Yi checked his attribute panel. Name, Lin Yi. Talent, Healing Master, Damage Reduction. Class, Healer, Healing Power 5, Spell Power 5, Physical Power 1. HP, 5100. MP, 3300. Strength, 51 effects HP, Physical Power, Critical Power. Agility, 72 effects action speed, Stamina recovery, critical rate. Spirit, 25 effects MP, Spell Power, Healing Power, Spell Critical. Free attributes, 10. Skills, Heal LV1, Punish LV1, Soul Chain equipped. Such an attribute panel was somewhat abnormal for a level 3 healer. Besides the surprisingly high values for each stat, the most peculiar thing was that Lin Yi's agility value was more than double his spirit. With these values displayed, he didn't look like a normal level 3 healer should. Because for a healer, the top priority should be to increase spirit. After all, spirit is linked to MP, healing power, etc., directly affecting the number and quality of healing spells, which is the lifeblood of a healer. But Lin Yi's situation was special. There wasn't even a magic user in his team, which led to an extremely low chance of him acquiring spirit. After one secret realm, it was already quite difficult for Lin Yi to gain 25 points in spirit. Lin Yi could only put all 10 free attribute points into spirit, raising it directly to 35 points. Rare classes are really good. You get extra free attribute rewards after leveling up, Lin Yi mused with some emotion. For example, a flame warrior, as long as their talent's synergy reaches 150% or above, will gain an additional 5 to 10 free attribute points per level. Therefore, rare classes with high synergy will have much higher attribute values in the later stages than common classes. And common classes, no matter how high their compatibility, won't receive extra attribute rewards. The treatment is worlds apart. However, for Lin Yi, none of this really mattered anymore. Because he could gain extra attribute values through healing spells. Refreshing Flame Forest History, obtained reward Skill Stone. Skill Stone can be used to increase skill level. Just as Lin Yi finished dealing with the attribute points, he saw another prompt. Skill Stone. Lin Yi raised his eyebrow slightly. This reward was decent enough. A skill stone was worth 50,000 yuan, and it was a recognized store of value, even usable as currency. For a novice ordinary level secret realm, getting a reward worth 50,000 yuan was already extremely good. It's a skill stone. We're rich! Hook exclaimed. The twin sisters were also a little excited at this moment, not expecting to get a skill stone just by rewriting history. This was simply a pleasant surprise. Lin Yi glanced at them, finding these guys somewhat endearing. Just one skill stone, and they were this excited. If later on, upgrading a skill would require hundreds or even thousands of skill stones, what kind of expressions would they have then? Lin Yi. Just then, Li Fei tugged on Lin Yi's arm. Lin Yi turned his head, about to ask, when he saw Li Fei had secretly slipped something into his hand. After a slight pause, Lin Yi immediately realized it was a skill stone. Li Fei looked up, smiling sweetly at Lin Yi. In her opinion, this skill stone rightfully belonged to Lin Yi. As for why she secretly gave it to Lin Yi, it was naturally just because she was worried Hook and the others would be embarrassed. After all, Li Fei had slacked off the whole time, while Hook and the others had genuinely put in effort. Although without Lin Yi, they were destined not to get this skill stone, one shouldn't completely negate their efforts because of that. But apparently, Li Fei had underestimated Hook and their awareness. After a moment of excitement, Hook proactively said, "Boss, this skill stone should be yours." "That's right. Brother Lin, here you go." "Mine too, for you." Diane and Dana, the two sisters, also obediently handed over their skill stones. They knew very well that whether they could clear the blazing forest with their own strength was another matter, let alone rewriting history, which was even more impossible. One should know that those big-shot teams charging for secret realm runs outside would typically charge tens of thousands to 100,000 per trip. Moreover, in such teams, even if you paid, all the drops would belong to the captain. Hook and the others not only paid nothing, but also filled their spatial bags, leveled up, and even gained the glory of first in history. They had already made a huge profit. If they were to still covet this skill stone now, it would seem a bit too ungracious. In that case, I'll accept these skill stones. Lin Yi calmly accepted the skill stones from Hook and the others. He hadn't expected that by rewriting a record, he could actually gain 5 skill stones. That was a full 250,000 yuan. After the settlement was successful, Lin Yi and the others exited the blazing forest. Back at the professional plaza in Shancheng City, Lin Yi couldn't help but stretch, feeling incredibly refreshed. Dimly, it was as if he recalled his previous life. His first secret realm back then was also the fire forest, but his circumstances were completely different from now. At that time, like most people, he couldn't even handle the first few waves of minor monsters. But now, he had directly reordered historical records and received generous rewards. The difference between the two was truly as vast as heaven and earth. And as they emerged from the secret realm at this moment, their phones began ringing off the hook. Because the news of them reordering historical records had already spread, even Hook and others, who were clearly just hangers-on, were now receiving all sorts of concerns and congratulations from family and friends. Hook replied, grinning from ear to ear, incredibly smug. As for the twin sisters, they received similar treatment, busy replying to the concerns of their relatives and friends. Li Fei's phone also rang, apparently someone had sent her a message. But unlike Hook and the others, Li Fei's brows remained furrowed. She didn't seem too happy. As for Lin Yi, he appeared particularly solitary as an orphan. He had no relatives to begin with. And due to Su Yaoyao's divisive machinations, he had also become estranged from many friends, so at this moment, apart from a handful of sporadic congratulatory messages, few people reached out to him. Of course. These were all superficial. Most importantly, there was a problem with his profession. Lin Yi was certain that if his listed profession had been a fire warrior, his phone would have been ringing off the hook by now. Unfortunately, his current profession was a healer. Not the fire warrior that was 200% compatible with his talent. So, even though Lin Yi had reordered historical records, few people came to congratulate him at this time. This desolate scene was a stark contrast, two complete extremes, compared to yesterday's scene where girls offered themselves to him. "Boss, what's the next plan?" Hook's eyes lit up as he looked at Lin Yi after replying to his family's messages. And Dian and Dina were the same. If you're going to cling to a thigh, cling tight. Lin Yi wasn't in a hurry to make a decision, only saying, "First, go handle your own matters, then we'll talk. If anything comes up, contact me in the team chat channel." Lin Yi instructed. He also had some personal matters to attend to. "Okay. I'll be back in a flash." Hook didn't delay at all and immediately jogged away. As did the sisters Dian and Dina. Actually, their nervousness was simple. They were worried that if they acted too slowly, Lin Yi would kick them out of the team. Watching Lin Yi's performance against the Goblin Priest, it was already clear that Lin Yi had very high demands for efficiency. If they made Lin Yi wait, this team would probably have nothing to do with them. So at that moment, they all had to finish their own tasks as quickly as possible, and then wait for Lin Yi. Instead of making Lin Yi wait for them. Seeing how sensible they were, Lin Yi couldn't help but be satisfied with Li Fei's eye for talent. "Lin Yi. I have something to take care of, I need to go home first." At this moment, Li Fei spoke, her gaze somewhat evasive. Lin Yi glanced at Li Fei, and finally said, "If there's anything, just come directly to me." "MHM." Li Fei nodded, then quietly left. Watching Li Fei's preoccupied figure disappear, Lin Yi's eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't say anything more. This level of achievement isn't enough. Lin Yi knew that the person under the most pressure right now was definitely his homeroom teacher. Not anyone else. In his previous life, he had caused trouble by giving the blazing warrior profession to Su Yaoyao. Although it was eventually confirmed that he had indeed voluntarily given the professional emblem to Su Yaoyao, Chen Daosheng still lost his job because of it. However, he didn't resent Lin Yi for it. Instead, he comforted Lin Yi at the time and blamed himself, saying his negligence had led to Lin Yi's professional emblem being swindled away. If it weren't for Chen Daoxing's teachings, Lin Yi might not have been able to get back on his feet so easily in his previous life. In this life, I want you to proudly say, I am your student. In Lin Yi's mind, he actually already had a rather insane plan. That was to conquer Abyss difficulty dungeon. Each dungeon has 3 difficulties: normal, hard, and abyss. Normal is the most common choice and preferred for leveling. If one chooses hard difficulty, the rewards will be more generous, but this difficulty is only suitable for teams with a certain level of strength to challenge themselves. And abyss. That's exclusively for true desperados. This difficulty is no longer suitable for grinding experience, it's only for showing off one's strength. Abyss difficulty perfectly replicates the intensity, difficulty, and danger of an interdimensional rift, almost maxing them out. Under normal circumstances, very few people dare to attempt such a difficulty, let alone clear it. If it were in the past, Lin Yi would also have thought his idea was a bit crazy. But now it's different. He possesses a talent of the healing overlord caliber. If he can't even conquer the abyss difficulty of a beginner-level dungeon, he might as well hang himself early tomorrow morning. Of course, the preliminary preparations are still indispensable. Lin Yi might even need to be prepared to replace team members. Although Hook and the others are very sensible and work hard enough, if Lin Yi were to say he wanted to enter an abyss difficulty dungeon, they might all back down. Of course, it will be up to their own choice at that time. If they are willing to risk their lives to accompany him, Lin Yi will naturally bring them different rewards. If they choose to give up such an opportunity, then it can only be said that their fate with Lin Yi ends at the blazing forest. Anyway, Lin Yi was more than happy to have a new group of people to level up his stats with. First, go and prepare everything that needs to be prepared. The next moment, Lin Yi arrived in front of a familiar stall. Oh, little brother, it's you? The owner selling spatial bags smiled at Lin Yi. He looked very pleased with himself. Every year, there were clueless new players who thought they could buy a dozen or 20 spatial bags and make a fortune in the secret realm. But they all came back to return the items without exception. At this moment, in the owner's opinion, this new player in front of him was obviously also here to return items. However, Lin Yi shook his head and said, "Give me 30 more spatial bags." "Alright, here's 9,005, money for you, take the spatial BA." The owner suddenly widened his eyes and asked, "Wait, what did you just say?" He somewhat doubted if his ears were broken. "You heard me right, please get me 30 more beginner spatial bags." Lin Yi repeated his request. "No. You want so many." The owner was very confused. What was going on here? "Oh, I'm buying them for my homeroom teacher, he said he wants to give our classmates a little help." Lin Yi then spun a yarn. Having been reborn, Lin Yi felt absolutely no psychological burden for such harmless lies. Of course, it was also because the owner seemed like a good person, otherwise, Lin Yi wouldn't have wasted so much breath with him. Sell or not, there were plenty of vendors selling spatial bags anyway. I see. The owner suddenly understood, and then said with a renewed smile, "What a good teacher. I'll give you a cost price 30 spatial bags, just give me 13,500. Hearing that a teacher was buying them as rewards for students, the owner generously offered a decent discount. Calculating it, a beginner spatial bag only cost 450 yuan, which could be said to be genuinely no profit at all. "Thank you, boss." Lin Yi picked up his phone and transferred the money directly. "Alright. Here are your spatial bags." The owner smiled as he handed the spatial bags to Lin Yi. After watching Lin Yi leave, he picked up his phone to check the transfer record. This name. Where have I seen it before? Lin Yi, Lin Yi. The owner suddenly widened his eyes, and then he finally reacted. That fair-skinned young man just now, he's actually the newcomer who reset the historical records? You really can't judge a book by its cover. Leaving the spatial bag stall, Lin Yi went directly into the official center in the professional square. There were actually spatial bags sold here too, but there were no discounts, which was why Lin Yi chose to buy them from the small stall outside earlier. Save a little whenever possible. Lin Yi walked directly to a counter and plopped down. "Hello, how can I help you?" Behind the counter was a sweet-looking young woman. "I need to sell some items first," Lin Yi said, taking out his spatial bag. At this moment, the young woman behind the counter saw Lin Yi take out a low-grade spatial bag and couldn't help but frown. But in her mind, she was quickly trying to place Lin Yi. He looked like a newcomer, and it was still early. Clearing a normal difficulty secret realm would take at least 2 to 3 hours. So, this young man in front of her probably gave up halfway and retreated with his teammates. In such a situation, he probably hadn't even filled his low-grade spatial bag, right? Moreover, even if a single low-grade spatial bag were full, what valuable items could it contain? She directly spoke up, saying, "Why don't you go outside first? It's quicker to find those vendors outside to sell loose items." Lin Yi glanced at the woman. He had intended to explain that he had other business to attend to after selling his items. But seeing the clear emotional tone and expression, he decided it wasn't worth the effort. "If you can't handle it, get the manager. I need to sell 2 green grade items, and then I have other business to do," Lin Yi stated directly. The young woman was stunned, completely unprepared for this young man, whom she had judged incapable of clearing a dungeon, to be here to sell green grade equipment. The most crucial thing was that, judging by his resolute attitude, he was unlike those timid, ordinary students. She immediately realized that she had misjudged him this time. But asking her to get the manager just for selling 2 green grade items, wasn't that a roundabout way of complaining about her? "I'm sorry, our manager is attending to other clients. I can handle green grade equipment myself." The young woman finally managed to put on a professional smile. "No, after selling my items, I also need to apply for a loan. I need you to get a manager over here immediately." Lin Yi directly raised his voice, standing his ground. Attending to clients, who could be fooled by such a flimsy excuse? Did she really think he was one of those naive students who could be easily tricked? The young woman's smile stiffened slightly. It felt like this student was just looking for trouble. What kind of loan could a student who had just started his profession possibly get? What's going on? Just then, as if by coincidence, a voice of inquiry came from nearby. The young woman was startled and immediately stood up, saying, "Manager Zhang, it's nothing, I can handle it." 2 people arrived, a slightly overweight middle-aged man and an elderly man in a green priest's robe. Manager Zhang glanced at Lin Yi, seeing him as just an ordinary student, and didn't really pay much attention. He was about to casually reprimand the young woman and tell her to quickly take care of the client's business. However, the elderly man beside him, upon seeing Lin Yi, had his eyes light up. "Lin Yi? What a coincidence!" With a smile, Lu Qingshan was the first to greet Lin Yi. It was then that Lin Yi noticed Lu Qingshan had arrived. He immediately stood up, bowed slightly, and called out, "Bishop Lu." He hadn't expected to encounter Lu Qingshan here. Meanwhile, throughout the entire hall, people who had been peeking over due to the previous commotion now looked surprised. "Lin Yi? Is that the Lin Yi who just reorganized the historical records of the Flame Forest? It must be. Didn't you see even Bishop Lu actively calling out to him? Does an ordinary person get that kind of treatment? Holy crap, he's quite handsome." As for the girl behind the counter, she felt a chill run through her body. She never imagined that this young man was the Lin Yi who had just made headlines across the entire city of Shantao. If that was his identity, he certainly had the qualifications for a professional loan. And it seemed that Lin Yi and a big shot like Lu Qingshan actually knew each other. This was a big shot that even their general manager Zhang had to be polite and curry favor with. "So it's Lin Yi. No wonder I felt you were extraordinary at first glance." Zhang Ruiqi's attitude at this moment did a complete 180-degree turn. Come. Let's go to the VIP room for some tea." Zhang Ruiqi greeted him with great enthusiasm. Lin Yi showed no intention of moving. "Let's go. I have a few things I'd like to talk to you about," Lu Qingshan said to Lin Yi with a slight smile. Lin Yi was a little frustrated. He actually didn't intend to waste too much time here. But since Lu Qingshan had extended the invitation, he couldn't refuse and followed him towards the inside of the hall. As for the girl, she was utterly dumbfounded after witnessing this scene. If she had been nicer just now, and kept Lin Yi around, perhaps she could have landed a big client. But now, not only did she gain nothing, she might even face punishment. What a huge loss. Lu Qingshan didn't actually have much to say to Lin Yi, only talked about how nice the weather was, and then went to handle his own business. In truth, this kind old man merely wanted to diffuse the small conflict in the hall earlier, and didn't genuinely have anything specific he needed to tell Lin Yi. Lin Yi wasn't a fool, he could discern that much. At this moment, only Lin Yi and Zhang Ruiqi were in the VIP room. Brother Lin Yi, your items have been appraised, they can be sold for over 99,800 yuan. I've directly rounded it up to 100,000 for you. As the general manager of the professional center, Zhang Ruiqi's word carried weight, and the efficiency of the junior staff was immediately maximized. In less than 10 minutes, everything Lin Yi wanted to sell had been inventoried. For items worth over 90,000, he used his authority to adjust the total to 100,000 yuan for Lin Yi, which was quite a show of respect. Thank you for your consideration, General Manager Zhang. Lin Yi quickly expressed his gratitude. Hey! No need to be so polite. If you're giving me face, just call me Brother Zhang. Zhang Ruiqi spoke up at this moment, trying to get closer. Lin Yi didn't refuse, nodding, okay. Brother Zhang, thank you. Zhang Ruiqi nodded repeatedly, his face full of smiles. Initially, he had invited Lin Yi in only out of respect for Lu Qingshan. After all, even though Lin Yi had reorganized the historical records, his social status was apparent, and Zhang Ruiqi, given his position, didn't need to curry favor with Lin Yi. But now, things were different. Because when Lin Yi took things out of his spatial bag just now, it truly shocked him. Based on his experience, the items Lin Yi was selling were mostly materials produced in beginner-level secret realms, nothing particularly rare. The most valuable items were just 2 green-grade pieces of equipment. But the key was that the total volume of these items combined definitely exceeded 4 cubic meters. According to the volume doubling rule for spatial bags exceeding 4 cubic meters were only available in 8 cubic meter and 16 cubic meter sizes. The latter didn't need to be considered, those were luxury items worth over 1 billion, and extremely rare, seldom seen by ordinary people. So, it could basically be confirmed that the spatial bag in Lin Yi's possession was 8 cubic meters. But even that would be worth tens of millions. Zhang Ruiqi, as the general manager of the professional center, couldn't even afford a spatial bag of that level, only using a 4 cubic meter one. In his opinion, Lin Yi's identity was definitely not simple. Coupled with his acquaintance with Lu Qingshan, Zhang Ruiqi's scalp tingled slightly. Could this young man's background be very deep? So, his current politeness towards Lin Yi was even on par with that towards Lu Qingshan, the green-robed bishop. Lin Yi accepted the 100,000 yuan. At this point, his balance had returned to 6 figures. As expected, entering secret realms was the fastest way to make money. Of course, only he could earn this much. If it were anyone else, a single trip to a secret realm might yield less than 1/10 of what Lin Yi brought back. Considering material consumption and equipment investment, maintaining a break even in the early stages would be cause for celebration. Making a profit was out of the question. By the way, Manager Zhang, I'd also like to apply for a professional's loan from your center. Lin Yi spoke again. Zhang Ruiqi's spirits lifted. A big deal was coming. If he closed this one, his annual targets would likely be secure. Yes, no problem. Brother Lin, just tell me how much you want to borrow. Zhang Ruiqi said, patting his chest. Given Lin Yi's identity, wouldn't he be borrowing tens of millions at least? Thinking of this, Zhang Ruiqi was a little excited. I'd like to borrow 1 million. Lin Yi said. Zhang Ruiqi was somewhat bewildered. 1 million? Is that enough? This was quite different from what he had imagined. It's enough, my expenses aren't high. Lin Yi said calmly. Zhang Ruiqi's eyes darted around, cursing himself for being foolish. For scions of powerful families, like this one, who hide their identities and come to a 4th-tier settlement like Shanxing for training, there must be numerous restrictions on them. Otherwise, what's the point of training? 1 million is definitely not my brother Lin's limit, it's merely his self-restraint. What's this called? This is called self-discipline. This is called being strong because you desire nothing. Zhang Ruiqi, filled with awe, immediately said, "No problem, 1 million is very simple, I'll handle it for you quickly." Lin Yi nodded, calmly picked up his teacup, and drank tea. Lin Yi had no idea what Zhang Ruiqi was brainstorming after all, he couldn't read minds. But this 1 million was of great use to him. It was crucial for whether he could conquer the abyssal difficulty dungeon next. Everything went very smoothly, and Lin Yi received 1 million in funds. In addition to these funds, there was also a black card with gold edges, which Zhang Ruiqi had specially prepared for Lin Yi. This item was the famous professional black card, a symbol of status. Lin Yi had owned one in his previous life too. But that was after he had been a raging flame priest for several years and reached his peak. He hadn't expected to get such a card so quickly in this life. Lin Yi showed little expression, directly putting the card into his pocket. It was a very familiar item, so he couldn't be surprised at all. And this calm demeanor made Zhang Ruiqi even more certain that Lin Yi was no ordinary person. "Brother Zhang, thank you for your trouble. I have things to attend to, so I won't bother you any longer." Lin Yi stood up and said politely, "No trouble at all, no trouble at all. Brother Lin, whenever you're free, come over for tea," Zhang Ruiqi said with a conciliatory smile. Lin Yi nodded slightly, signifying his agreement. This kind of demeanor, if displayed by a student, would be somewhat incongruous. But it made Zhang Ruiqi increasingly certain that this young man was truly extraordinary. The two walked out of the VIP room, with Zhang Ruiqi following beside Lin Yi, slightly half a step behind, bowing all the way. Returning to the main hall, such a scene surprised even the staff at the center. When had they ever seen Zhang Ruiqi so humble? Just setting a historical record for a normal difficulty novice dungeon, was that worth Zhang Ruiqi's profound respect? After leaving the professional center, Lin Yi immediately found a shop. It was a small shop specializing in selling various mechanical puppets, a store that served mechanics and puppeteers. Although other professions could also use mechanical puppets, without relevant skills, they couldn't command these puppets as if they were extensions of their own arms. Therefore, other professions rarely considered using mechanical puppets. "Little brother, what would you like to buy?" The boss immediately put on a smiling face when he saw a customer enter. Lin Yi walked straight over and said, "Give me 10 sheep puppets, and put them into these spatial bags." After speaking, he tossed a stack of spatial bags onto the counter. Upon hearing Lin Yi's request, the boss didn't show much of a reaction, only giving Lin Yi an extra glance. Sheep puppets have no offensive power, they're just moving targets. They are typically used by institutions like schools to train students in using skills or shooting, so they are usually purchased in large batches. 10 sheep puppets are actually just the quantity a school would buy for one semester. So, the boss wasn't surprised by this request. "No problem, the total price is 1 million. Are you sure you want them?" The only thing the boss was curious about was whether this young man in front of him could afford the money. "I can pay in advance, but if these sheep puppets get damaged, will you recycle them?" Lin Yi said, completely without any mental burden. This money was lent to him from the professional center, interest-free and with no repayment deadline, so he could spend it as he pleased. Of course, Lin Yi wasn't someone who disregarded rules. He had to repay this money before he left Shantao City. "What are you talking about? My puppets are super durable. As long as the core components aren't damaged, I offer recycling services. If you don't believe me, go ask around nearby. My puppets are definitely the best quality." The boss patted his chest and promised. Puppets, indeed, can be recycled almost indefinitely as long as their core components are undamaged. However, the recycling price would vary according to the degree of damage to other parts. But overall, it could still reach nearly half the original price. Otherwise, if they were discarded after just one use, wouldn't the puppeteer profession become exclusive to web novel protagonists? Soon, the boss filled 10 spatial bags for Lin Yi, containing a total of 10 sheep puppets. Carrying the 10 spatial bags, Lin Yi walked out. Finally, all the preparations were done. At this point, Lin Yi was ready for everything required to enter the abyssal-level secret realm. Lin Yi had already returned to the place he had agreed upon with his teammates. However, there were several people standing there, only one of whom Lin Yi recognized, Hook. Seeing Lin Yi approach, he waved from afar. "Boss! You're finally here." Once Lin Yi got closer, Hook began to speak. The other two also nodded kindly towards Lin Yi. Lin Yi returned a friendly nod, but still looked at Hook with confusion, wondering why he had brought these two people. "Boss, it's like this, I'm afraid I can't level up with you anymore. After all, there's already one warrior in the team. But don't get me wrong, I still acknowledge you as my boss," Hook explained. The meaning of his words was very clear. That is, his profession overlapped with Li Fei's, and most crucially, Li Fei was a rare profession while he was just a regular warrior. Comparing the two, Li Fei could fully perform, and even surpass, the role he could play as a warrior in the team. To still be clinging to the team at this point was quite shameless. After much thought, Hook decided it was best to part ways amicably and say goodbye to Lin Yi. "Have you thought it through?" Lin Yi didn't try to persuade him much. In his opinion, it didn't matter who was on the team. As long as there was someone to help him farm stats, that was all that mattered. If he were purely chasing efficiency and profit, farming dungeons alone might even be faster. "I've thought it through," Hook said helplessly. If he could, he would also want to stay on the team. But he didn't want to be a freeloader, constantly taking advantage. Lin Yi glanced at the teammates behind Hook. One was holding a staff, and the other had a long dagger tucked into his waistband. They were a mage and an assassin, respectively. Both of them, seeing Lin Yi looking at them, couldn't help but feel a bit nervous and immediately put on a smile. They had obviously learned from Hook how strong Lin Yi was. And power always commands awe. "If you don't mind, wait a bit longer." Lin Yi checked the time. It was almost the agreed upon moment. Li Fei and the twin sisters hadn't arrived yet, so he immediately made a judgment in his mind. All right. Hook was a little confused, not knowing why Lin Yi asked him to wait. But since it was Lin Yi's instruction, he would follow it. Soon, 10 minutes passed. Lin Yi and the three others chatted idly, and he learned the names of the other two. The mage was named Zhao Xueming, and the assassin was Li Feng. Both, like Hook, were students from the city experimental middle school. Why aren't the Dinah sisters here yet? Hook checked the time. It was already past the hour, and there was no sign of the girls. Lin Yi just smiled and said, "If those two don't come, just kick them and replace them with your two classmates." Zhao Xueming and Li Feng's eyes lit up upon hearing this. Great! Boss, we will absolutely follow your arrangements." Right. Me too. To be able to follow Lin Yi was naturally a dream come true. Seeing that Lin Yi didn't make him leave but instead invited his friends to join the team, Hook was incredibly touched. He truly hadn't chosen the wrong boss. As for Lin Yi, once he saw the three of them agree to join the team, he immediately kicked Dian and Dinah. Although he didn't know their situation, they weren't relatives or close friends. "If you're late and don't say anything, don't blame me for kicking you directly." As for Li Fei, she had already sent Lin Yi a message saying she would be a few minutes late. "He's already kicked us. Good, I don't even need to say I want to leave the team." Dian actually laughed when she saw the message that she had been kicked from the team. "Sister, isn't this a bit rude?" Dinah said, a little embarrassed. "What do you mean, good or not? We're both level 2 now. We can take others to level up, and each person can get at least 50,000. A single dungeon run would be an income of 150,000 yuan. Isn't that better than following him to farm dungeons and having to hand over all the drops?" Dian said, annoyed. Dana hesitated for a moment and said, "But can we really handle it?" Previously in the Blazing Forest, Lin Yi basically controlled the entire area, and everyone else just had to charge mindlessly. Now Dian was insisting on leading a team to farm dungeons herself. Would this really work? Don't worry, I'll be the commander. Besides, I've already contacted everyone, and the money has been collected. We can't just refund it, can we? Diane said impatiently. Seeing this, Dana could only reluctantly accept. But she always felt that her sister's arrangements weren't very reliable. On the other side, Li Fei had already arrived. When she saw Zhao Xueming and Li Feng, the two new team members, she was slightly surprised but didn't question anything. With all the team members present, Lin Yi finally said, "Next round, we're still going to the Blazing Forest, but we're going straight to challenge abyssal difficulty." At this, several team members, including Li Fei, couldn't help but tense up. Abyssal difficulty? Hook was somewhat dumbfounded. Could someone as weak as him really challenge such a difficulty? As for the other two, Zhao Xueming and Li Feng, they clearly looked fearful as well. Hook was at least a level 2 warrior. But the two of them had never cleared any dungeon, had no experience whatsoever, and were still in their level 1 whiteboard state. Asking them to tackle abyssal difficulty, the gap was indeed a bit too large. That's right, abyssal difficulty. And this is the last time I'll be guiding a dungeon run for free. You guys are lucky. Lin Yi spoke again. He looked as if he didn't even put abyssal difficulty in his eyes. And from what he said, future dungeon runs with him would all require payment. But this was also quite normal. Generally, strong players guiding dungeon runs would charge a fee, which varied depending on the dungeon's level and difficulty. If it were like Lin Yi's previous run, or he helped them reset the Blazing Forest's historical records, even charging $1 million or more would be simple. This run, I need you all to help me establish my reputation. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a good thing as free, Lin Yi added. To be honest, the most important thing when wanting to lead people through dungeons is reputation. You might have the strength, but if no one knows about it, isn't it all for naught? So, if the last run was a warm-up, this time Lin Yi intended to fully establish his name. And this could also solve many problems for Lin Yi. The three looked at each other, as if they had made some kind of decision. All right. I'm willing to follow you, boss, and take on an abyssal difficulty run. Hook had never doubted Lin Yi. He only doubted himself. After all, if he was instantly killed by a monster, no matter how powerful Lin Yi's healing was, it wouldn't bring a dead man back to life. But since Lin Yi still invited him, there was undoubtedly a way for Lin Yi to carry him. Otherwise, wouldn't it be easier for Lin Yi to find some more powerful teammates? As for Zhao Xueming and Li Feng, seeing their friend follow, they both decided to take a gamble as well. All in. What about you? Lin Yi looked at Li Fei. I'm fine with it. Li Fei nodded slightly, indicating that she would follow whatever Lin Yi arranged. This was unconditional trust. Good. Then let's set off. Lin Yi smiled. With new members joining this time, he could happily grind stats again. If he could even get a talent out of it, that would be even better. Lin Yi quickly opened his panel, selected the secret realm, and directly initiated the teleportation. Just as they entered the secret realm, an announcement appeared before everyone in the professional plaza. Lin Yi's team has entered Blazing Forest Abyssal Tier. This message made everyone freeze for a moment, then it stirred up an uproar. Lin Yi again? Abyssal Tier. Isn't that too big a leap? Isn't he afraid of pulling something? Holy crap! Abyssal Tier Blazing Forest? Wouldn't everyone need to be at least level 3, with S-tier talents or higher, plus rare professions, to clear that? Damn! Is he risking his life? He has 2 level 1 newbies in his team. He's probably going to die in there. He must have been blinded by the achievement of refreshing the normal difficulty historical record last time, right? For a time, the entire professional plaza was shocked by this message. Diane and Dinah, the two sisters who were also in the plaza, were among them. They couldn't help but exchange glances, and a hint of relief could be seen in each other's eyes. Luckily, they had been kicked out of the team. Otherwise, they would have died in that secret realm. In the first high school of Shancheng City, Su Yaoyao had a hint of excitement on her face. $1 million in income, and then quickly spent it all. What is that if not money laundering? I knew Li Fei must have given Lin Yi benefits. She held a transfer record in her hand, her expression somewhat twisted. This was Lin Yi's transaction record, obtained from the bank by a boy who was pursuing her, using his family connections. Although the transfer to Lin Yi was from a public account, it couldn't directly prove that Li Fei transferred it to Lin Yi. But doesn't that make it even clearer that there's a big problem here? It's severely illegal to trade professional badges, so to avoid suspicion, it certainly couldn't be a real name transfer. Even more suspiciously, Lin Yi quickly spent all of the money after receiving it. A full million, used to buy 10 sheep puppets. One might ask, what would Lin Yi, a student, buy such teaching aids for, items that only educational institutions would purchase? Other than laundering the money Li Fei transferred to him, what more reasonable explanation could there be? So Su Yaoyao, holding this transfer record, was immediately overwhelmed with excitement. She rushed back to school, straight to the principal's office, and burst the door open with a bang. I want to report something. At this shout, everyone inside the room turned their heads to look at her in unison. This startled Su Yaoyao. Because among the people inside, several were wearing the uniforms of the Professional Alliance. Su Yaoyao? What are you doing? Inside the principal's office, Chen Daosheng, who was already distraught over Lin Yi's matter, couldn't help but feel a little strange. To be honest, Su Yaoyao felt a bit intimidated, not expecting so many people to be in the room. It's nothing, get out quickly. Don't cause trouble here. Principal O Shejiang's face darkened as he shooed Su Yaoyao away. He was absolutely furious at this moment. Last night, he had happily sent the list of excellent students to the Professional Alliance. But just now, they came directly to him, asking why Lin Yi's profession didn't match the one on the list. How would he know what was going on? So he immediately called Lin Yi's homeroom teacher, Chen Daosheng, over. And now, an oblivious girl ran in and opened the door. Wasn't she just inviting bad luck? I have evidence of Lin Yi and Li Fei trading professional badges. Su Yaoyao swallowed hard, finally articulating her full statement. Immediately, the entire principal's office fell into silence. Chen Daosheng's face was a little pale as he looked at Su Yaoyao and sternly said, "Do you know what you're saying? This is very serious, you can't just speak carelessly. Teacher Chen, leave this matter to us." The people from the Professional Alliance stopped Chen Daosheng, walked straight to Su Yaoyao, and said, "I'm from the investigation department of the Shantao City Professional Alliance. Come in and tell us exactly what happened." Su Yaoyao looked at the person in front of her, feeling a tingling sensation on her scalp. She had initially thought she would just complain directly to the principal. But then she reconsidered, the Professional Alliance people were involved. If Lin Yi and Li Fei's crime of trading badges was confirmed, wouldn't they all end up in jail? They might even be eliminated by powerful individuals from the alliance. Then she remembered all the humiliation Lin Yi had inflicted upon her. Su Yaoyao's head grew hot, and as if by some strange impulse, she took a step forward and entered the principal's office. Only one thought was in her mind. Death. They all deserve to die. This transaction record does have some suspicious points we will investigate further. After a series of questions, the Professional Alliance staff took away the so-called evidence provided by Su Yaoyao. Of course, they didn't fully accept it, stating that they needed to go back and investigate further. Section Chief Qin, what more is there to investigate? Isn't the evidence already conclusive? Su Yaoyao said anxiously. Then I need to ask you, where did this transaction record come from, and can you ensure it's 100% authentic? Section Chief Qin of the Alliance said with a cold snort. How can I not guarantee the truth? I can swear. Su Yaoyao was about to speak, but she was pulled back by a staff member in the office, preventing her from continuing to spout nonsense. Humph. We'll go back and investigate this matter first. If it's indeed confirmed as a transaction, it might have to be reported. This is a very serious matter. Section Chief Qin said again. According to the regulations of the Professional Alliance, if the buying and selling of professional badges is confirmed, both the buyer and seller will be prohibited from using any public professional measures, and may even be barred from entering secret realms. This basically amounts to declaring the end of a professional's career. If public measures cannot be used, one can still go to the black market or elsewhere, but being barred from secret realms means one can only go to the dimensional rifts in the outside world, where survival is a near impossible feat. In addition, relevant personnel responsible for education will also face corresponding punishments. After all, such matters have always been a top priority throughout the years, so the responsibility of relevant educators will definitely be pursued. It can be said that if typically caught, many people will inevitably be implicated. Soon, the investigators finally left. Have you contacted Lin Yi? Tell him to come over quickly, I want to ask him exactly what's going on. The principal said angrily. If this matter really involved the transaction of professional badges, he himself might face punishment. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but look at Su Yaoyao with resentment. Why did she have to jump out and make a fuss for no reason? Originally, he could have tried his best to guide the matter towards voluntary exchange. That way, as long as one person took responsibility for lax education, others could at least remain unaffected. But now, because of Su Yaoyao's outburst, if Lin Yi and Li Fei's buying and selling of professional badges were confirmed, the impact would be huge. In fact, the exchange of professional badges happens every year, because there is indeed a demand for it. To say that there are absolutely no transactions involved is naturally impossible. But the Professional Alliance chose to turn a blind eye to such situations. Now Su Yaoyao has directly brought the matter to light. Isn't this forcing people to act by the book? It could be said that the principal wished he could kick Su Yaoyao away. But for now, he could only tolerate it. Principal, we just received a message that Lin Yi and Li Fei have entered the abyss-level fire forest together. At this moment, the dean spoke. Ah? What did you say? Abyss level. The principal exploded upon hearing this. They'll die. This guy, why is he so reckless? Chen Daoxing's heart was also filled with bitterness. Look at you, what kind of students have you taught? Don't even think about this year's outstanding evaluations. The principal was furious. One must know that every school has death rate statistics. If this data is too high, it could lead to the school's overall ranking to drop. And if the ranking drops to a certain extent, the entire school leadership could be fired. How could the principal not be anxious? Hurry up, call back all the students we can. I'm holding a general assembly to use Lin Yi as a negative example and warn all the students in the school. The principal sighed. Principal, isn't that too arbitrary? Lin Yi just reorganized the historical records, and you were quite happy about it, weren't you? Chen Daoxing argued with some dissatisfaction. Teacher Chen, then was then, now is now. I also hope Lin Yi can survive, but is that possible? The immediate priority is to use him as an example to educate other children not to take such risks again. The principal shook his head, lamenting his disappointment. Chen Daoxing sighed abruptly, nodded helplessly, and was about to retreat when the principal called out to him again. Also, Teacher Chen, how about this? You go hand over your work to Teacher Lu first, and then go home to rest for a while. Hearing this, Chen Daoxing immediately understood the principal's implied meaning. He was being asked to resign in disgrace. Someone had to take the blame for this, and as a teacher with no background, wasn't he the perfect candidate? Chen Daoxing nodded slightly and left the principal's office. Watching all of this, Su Yaoyao, however, felt an unusual sense of satisfaction. How foolish, to run into an abyss-level secret realm. Isn't that just asking for death? She had already decided that Lin Yi was doomed to die. Her only regret was that the Flame Warrior's emblem still hadn't ended up in her hands. But now knowing that both Lin Yi and Li Fei were going to die in the secret realm, she still felt an unspeakable sense of relief. The abyss difficulty of the Flame Forest was a completely different concept from the normal difficulty. Normal difficulty was just a dark forest, with various goblins scattered everywhere. As long as you advanced towards the center of the forest and killed the goblin priest, you could complete the mission and successfully claim your reward. But under abyss difficulty, this forest had truly become a flame forest. Inside the forest, firelight flickered everywhere, illuminating the night sky in a dark red hue. And looking into the woods, one could occasionally spot pairs of blood-red, violent eyes between the dense trees. Just from the atmosphere alone, it was no longer comparable to normal difficulty. This is too terrifying. Zhao Xueming swallowed hard and said sheepishly. Boss, should I still be the one to pull aggro later? Hook asked nervously. Although he came in with a gambling mentality, now that he was actually in it, he couldn't help but feel a little scared. This environment was completely different from the normal difficulty. Let me do it. I have higher fire resistance. Li Fei stepped forward. As a flame warrior, she did have an advantage in this environment. But in the face of absolute stats, this bit of resistance was actually barely better than nothing. Don't worry. If I can get you in, I'm certainly prepared. Lin Yi said calmly. Hearing this, everyone looked at Lin Yi, their eyes filled with anticipation. They wanted to know what good idea Lin Yi could have. But then Lin Yi patted his spatial bag, and 3 round objects fell to the ground. With a tremor, they gradually transformed into the likeness of 3 sheep. Sheep? Sheep puppets? Hook stared, dumbfounded. Were these teaching props used in schools for students to practice their skills? That's right, they're sheep puppets. Lin Yi didn't deny it. He had purchased the sheep puppets precisely for clearing the abyssal difficulty now. As for what they were for, someone quickly helped interpret. Using sheep puppets to share the damage? That's a good idea. Li Fei's eyes lit up, and she immediately guessed Lin Yi's intention. Hearing this, Hook also quickly reacted and couldn't help but exclaim genius. Boss, you're amazing. To think of this method. This is as stable as it gets. Hook was a little excited. Only the 2 new members, Zhao Xueming and Li Feng, were still a bit confused, unsure of what was happening. How did the once timid Hook suddenly become so confident? But the next moment, they all understood. Lin Yi waved his staff, and in an instant, everyone in the team, including the 3 sheep puppets, glowed with a burst of light. This? Soul chains? Zhao Xueming paused, quickly checking the skill Lin Yi had just cast on them. At first glance, his eyes widened immediately. Damage sharing. So, those 3 sheep puppets are meant to help us bear a portion of the damage? Zhao Xueming instantly realized. No wonder Hook was so excited. Even these small monsters deal up to 100 points of damage. With 5 professionals and 3 sheep puppets, the shared damage would only be about 10 points. Completely within controllable range. If there were a downside, it would simply be that these sheep puppets were expensive, costing a whopping 100,000 yuan each. No wonder Lin Yi said this was the last time he would lead people through a secret realm for free. With such high costs, it truly wasn't sustainable without charging. Boss, I'll contract one of the sheep puppets. After we get out, I'll go to the professional center to get a loan and pay you back. Hook said sensibly. 100,000 yuan for a chance to clear an abyssal-level secret realm, to say that out loud would be pure wishful thinking. Although Lin Yi said he would take them for free, Hook still didn't intend to truly take advantage of it. Zhao Xueming and Li Feng immediately followed suit, afraid of being even a moment late. Again, Lin Yi could be generous, but they couldn't use Lin Yi's generosity as an excuse to take advantage of him with a clear conscience. Whatever. You'll cover the wear and tear of the puppets then. Lin Yi shrugged indifferently. He truly hadn't intended to take money from Hook and the others, but since they were so understanding, he naturally wouldn't stand on ceremony. I can get a loan too. Li Fei also said. Lin Yi said nothing, rattling the staff in his hand. Li Fei saw this and lowered her head, her face slightly flushed. This staff was a gift from Li Fei to Lin Yi, worth exactly 100,000. Clearly Lin Yi was telling her to count it towards the staff. With everything arranged, the 5 people and 3 sheep golems set off into the forest. This scene, one could say, was extremely bizarre. No one had ever heard of someone entering a secret realm with something like a sheep golem. Because although this thing has a staggering 1 million HP, it's essentially a moving target. Apart from getting hit, it's completely useless. Moreover, the monsters in the secret realm aren't fools, they won't just target a golem, so attempting to use sheep golems to draw monster aggro is utterly meaningless. Currently, Lin Ye's operation of bringing the sheep golems into the secret realm and making them actually useful was actually due to the convenience of a skill. Soul Chain, this skill is indeed a divine skill. If used properly, it can turn decay into magic. Croak. After entering the forest, Lin Yi and his team quickly encountered the first wave of goblins. Unlike the normal difficulty, in abyssal difficulty, there are no lone monsters, they are almost always in groups of 3 to 5, and there are even small strongholds where dozens of goblins gather at once. I'll go first. Li Fei was the first to charge towards the goblins, swinging her longsword and engaging them in battle. Huo and Li Feng immediately followed suit. As for Zhao Xueming, being a mage, he was in the back row, starting to conjure fireballs. A mage's fireball spell can be cast instantly or charged. Instant fireballs deal less damage individually, but the casting is relatively flexible, and with enough proficiency, the total damage dealt in the same timeframe is actually higher than that of charged fireballs. Average mages typically stand still and charge fireballs diligently, because not only is it less difficult, but it also conserves mana. But clearly, Zhao Xueming had greater ambitions and wanted to pursue a higher level path. Currently, once the fireball in his hand successfully condensed, he would immediately throw it out. Each cast took approximately 2 seconds, which was considered quite good among his peers. However, Lin Yi noticed that following Zhao Xueming's thrown fireball, there was another slightly smaller fireball, also striking the target simultaneously. Double cast? Lin Ye's eyes lit up, he hadn't expected Zhao Xueming's talent to be double cast. Double cast, as the name suggests, is a chance to perform an additional cast simultaneously with the primary cast. Although the effect of the second cast would be slightly weaker, this talent is still a rather excellent magic type talent. If Lin Yi could get his hands on Zhao Xueming's talent, it would definitely be a huge boon for him. It's just that the probability of replicating a talent is too low. Whether he can get it or not still depends on fate. The battle began, and in the distance, 3 goblins were entangled with 3 melee fighters. Relying on the soul chain to share damage, the damage sustained by everyone in the party was actually not too high. However, Lin Yi was generous with healing spells. Almost every second, a healing spell landed on everyone. Feeling the constant flickering holy light on his body, Zhao Xueming looked at Lin Yi with a somewhat strange expression. 1 healing spell per second? This level of casting is simply terrifying. He used to think that with diligent practice, he could also achieve this level. But now that he has truly become a caster, he understands just how difficult it is to cast spells as effortlessly as Lin Yi does. It's like he wants to instantly cast a fireball, but he can't. It takes him nearly 2 seconds just to successfully condense a fireball. Clearly, for most people, instant casting is just a beautiful wish. Only true geniuses can achieve instant casting. And Lin Yi is undoubtedly a genius in spellcasting. Lin Yi didn't know what Zhao Xueming was thinking at this moment. He only knew that if the probability was low, he'd make up for it with frequency. His frantic casting of healing spells now naturally had a purpose. Zhao Xueming's talent, he was determined to have it. Zhao Xueming felt as if he had achieved an unprecedented accomplishment. Herding sheep in a secret realm. Looking at the 3 sheep puppets in front of him, Zhao Xueming was somewhat amused and bewildered. But there was nothing he could do, because this was the task Lin Yi had given him, to watch over these 3 sheep. There were no puppet masters or similar professions in the party, so there was no direct way to control the sheep puppets. They could only use a clumsy method to herd these sheep puppets and prevent them from running wild. Losing a sheep was a minor issue, failing the dungeon clear due to it would be a major one. So now this heavy responsibility fell on Zhao Xueming's shoulders. For Zhao Xueming, who aspired to become an excellent caster, this arrangement was indeed a bit frustrating. What astonishing talent! Watching Lin Yi wield a staff that looked quite valuable, and with a simple wave, cast a healing spell, such a sight made him somewhat envious. It was just a pity that to reach such a level, he didn't know how much longer he would have to practice diligently. Your healing spell restored 23 health points to Li Fei, you gain 1 strength. Your healing spell restored 35 health points to Hook, you gain 1 strength. After a round of healing spells, Lin Yi once again reaped additional attribute points. Lin Yi glanced at his attribute panel, and his heart couldn't help but stir with excitement. His total attribute value at this moment was already close to exceeding 200 points. In his previous life, he only reached this level when he was almost level 20. And now he was only level 3, yet his physical strength was already comparable to those professionals in their teens and 20s. It had to be said that the Healing Overlord talent was practically like having a stat sheet enabled. If one didn't consider the level suppression that occurs at higher levels, purely in terms of attributes, Lin Yi could become invincible in the world just by grinding attributes. When high-level players fight low-level players, there is always suppression, which not only provides extra defense and resistance bonuses but also adds high crushing damage to attacks. Therefore, attempting to challenge opponents beyond one's level is extremely difficult. Of course, theoretically, as long as the stats are high enough to completely override the effects of level suppression, the vision of invincibility can still be achieved. But if Lin Yi were to accumulate attributes little by little like he was doing now, it's estimated that by the time he stacked his attribute values to absolute invincibility, he would already be in his twilight years, facing the great decline in attributes that comes with old age. So, trying to achieve invincibility by grinding attributes is actually not realistic. Focusing on both attributes and levels is the real way to go. Croak croak. Under abyssal difficulty, the goblins in the fire forest were no longer comparable to the green-skinned goblins found in normal difficulty. Goblins at this difficulty had crimson panels and were taller and more robust. The lowest level was 3, and occasionally there were even level 4 great goblins. Their HP was as high as 1,000 points, damage ranged from 50 to 60, and an occasional critical hit would deal nearly 100 points of damage, along with a burning effect. In groups of 3 to 5, they were an absolute nightmare for typical novice teams. Li Fei wielded a long sword, deftly dodging the goblins' attacks, then slashed the back of a fire goblin with her sword. Minus 130. A critical hit dealt over 130 damage. This damage left Hook and Li Feng, both melee professionals, stunned. Rare professions are still much stronger than us. Indeed. Hook and Li Feng couldn't help but feel a little envious. After killing a fire goblin, Li Fei flicked the blood off her longsword and, hearing Hook and Li Feng's conversation, couldn't help but shake her head. Talent, class compatibility, and personal ability are the true kings. As she spoke, a familiar light glowed on everyone in the team, and then their health was fully restored. Hook and Li Feng heartily agreed. Because they both knew who Li Fei was referring to,